Hey everyone, it's Alan over at Cobblers Plus, and thank you for joining us. In today's video, we're going to be working on our 2 boot New Yorks again. This time we're going to be doing basically the full treatment. In other words, presidential shine, whatever you want to call it. It's that shine that you do once every 6 to 12 months where you go through and take care of them completely. We are doing obviously a continuation because we did some work on them already, but you could do this as your once every 6 to 12 month treatment as well. So come join us and check out the steps that we take and the ones that we recommend for you to do as well. Now, obviously, like you've seen us working on these ones, we fixed up some scuffing and everything. Now at this point, we really want to go through and kind of do like a full maintenance. In other words, we showed you how to kind of upkeep shines and everything like that. This is that full-on treatment, if you want to call it, in other words, like that. We'll talk about additional type of options to do, once every couple of months type of thing, but this is that one that you really want to make sure that you do, like I said, about once every 6 to 12 months, depending how often you wear these shoes and depending how often you use a product of any kind on it, whether it's shining them with a wax or a polish of any kind, or a number of other things. You really want to make sure you do this at the very least once every 12 months to maintain your footwear and prevent it from looking shabby and prevent it from getting long-term damage, basically. So let's go ahead and get started. Now with this full step kind of process, in other words, you definitely want to make sure you take out the laces, which we've had the laces out already since we've been working on these bit by bit. We have done a video on taking care of the salt damage on these already. Obviously, there are some salt damages that may be fairly permanent that may have like puckering on it. Where did it go? Sorry, ended up going a little bit crazy thinking I had lost the spot, but it's right there. So there's a little bit of a leather puckering going on right in that area. And again, that can happen. If you do not take care of your footwear, if you don't commit to actually taking care of good quality footwear, in other words, and this kind of stuff happens, you're going to have permanent damage that just will never go away. There's no way of fixing it. In other words, you might as well get a new shoe if it's something that ends up bugging you. But at the same time, you got to understand the fact that you bought those shoes to be able to wear them. They're not a museum piece. Obviously, there are some museum type pieces out there that you maybe wear only strictly for certain occasions, which is understandable. By all means, go ahead and do that. I mean, there's a couple of my shoes. There's no way I'll end up wearing them here at the shop that, while I'm working. I mean, if I'm running around, that's one thing. But if I'm actually working back there, no, I'm going to spill something on them. I just know it. It's my luck. But anyways, after doing any of the salt treatment, if you have any kind of salt damage, if you wore them in rough weather or anything like that, I highly recommend doing that. But this right here is kind of the major step up. In other words, if I find my rag here. Now, some of you are always wondering, like, hey, should I use saddle soap? Should I use Renomat? And, should I use this a Renovator cream here because it's water-based and the water is going to act as a cleaning agent? It really depends on which step you're taking. Now, this one, obviously, we have to do before we show you any future types of treatments and cleaning and stuff like that, because a number of you out there who have never really maintained your shoes, you're probably going to have to take this step anyways and just go through and really thoroughly clean them and do what needs to be done. Now, first thing we're going to go ahead and grab is our Renomat, just because the Renomat is a little bit stronger. For the longest time, I've always thought that turpentine was kind of the key ingredient in here, but from what I understand, and this is kind of not really listed either, there is some form of alcohol in here as well. So it's not an acetone, it's not a thinning agent of any kind. Now, there may be some turpentine in there from what I can tell, but unfortunately, I just can't seem to find too much additional listings of what the key ingredients are. None of their catalogs or anywhere else that I could find really has all that information. Now, there is some kind of listing about it, and that alcohol is not your basic rubbing alcohol. It's a specific type, like almost industrial type use, where it's highly refined. In other words, it seems like from from what I can tell. Now, additional details is very hard for me to tell, but obviously we're going to have to do a video talking in more depth about it. So hopefully by the time I really talk in depth about this particular product, we'll have more information for you. But for the time being, this is the product that I highly recommend. Make sure you shake it up well, because it does separate the solutions in there. But for the time being, this is what you're going to want to use to remove excess amounts of polish, old polishes and silicones as well. Obviously, when I say silicones, that does not mean you take it right away to your suedes or nubucks if you ended up waterproofing them with something that has a silicone in it. So just go through it and clean it only on smooth leathers and gently scrub. You don't need to sit there just trying to rub away at it or anything like that. This in particular, the Rhino-Mat, even though it's not as strong as acetone or straight alcohol or a number of other cleaners out there, still is stronger, so it may remove some finish. Now finish, I mean by if it's like hand patinaed, and that's if you're sitting there scrubbing the spot, obviously. So just a light, quick clean over. Your goal is to really remove some of that polish. Now, my particular technique, as you can tell, I'm going through fairly fast and it's taken off a little bit. I haven't even touched the toe yet. My particular method is, my goal is to actually almost like try to apply it on there. Like not use it to scrub, but apply. And that will help soften up the creams, the waxes, just a little bit around the toe there, just really quick. Yes, even though we did the toe work on there, still want to go ahead and apply just a little bit. Now this is obviously to soften up any of the waxes or any kind of residues in there, and then I actually scrub. Now some of you may be saying, oh, he's doing a black pair of shoes. Well, what happens on a light pair? Same thing. Again, because this has more of a solvent in here, it's going to help remove a lot of that, and any form of solvents, anything that's alcohol or acetone, any solvent basically, it tends to evaporate quicker, not water-based. Water-based stuff, anything that has water, like say the Renovator here, Renovatoire, whatever you want to call it properly, I guess, that will take longer to evaporate. So definitely evaporates a lot quicker on this stuff. That's why you really want to go through fairly quick on there. Make sure you get inside that tongue. Now again, you don't always have to remove the laces, but during, I guess you can say, a full treatment like this, I highly recommend it. Go through the toes here real quick one more time and just apply a little bit of pressure, and we're good to go. We don't want to do too much. You could skip over the toe if you did the step before where you're actually filling in any kind of scuffs or scratches. You're perfectly fine doing that. I'm just doing this to kind of reopen up the pores. That's one thing that you're wanting to do with this, to help open up the pores in here and clean them out. In other words, to remove all those waxes, those pigments and stuff that are just settled over top, not the original dye pigment, obviously, just the pigments that are settled over top. We're trying to kind of remove that, unclog the pores and everything, and open them back up to ready them for the next steps. One other pointer also, great to use on the edging, because I know some of you do your own edging here around. Just do the same thing, kind of apply a coat like I did right there, and let it do its magic for a quick second. By the time you're done going all the way around the shoe, you can go back around and hit those spots again and scrub just a little bit harder. I like doing that just because after a while, I mean, if you're applying it every now and then, or if you have a shoe shiner or a cobbler who applies it for you, it builds up, it cakes on, you know, just make it look nicer. Otherwise, if you're just going to layer more and more coats of edge dressing on, it starts to crack and look terrible. And if you have different brands of edge dressing on there as well, it just continues on and it kind of counters each other. So do that and then let them sit there and dry for just a couple of minutes. This stuff dries very quickly, it evaporates quickly. I highly recommend doing this in a more ventilated area or outdoors. Don't do it inside the house. If you're in the basement, everyone upstairs is going to smell it. I know from personal experience, because I did like 3 pairs of the house. By the time I came upstairs, everyone's like, what is that smell? What are you doing downstairs? I'm like, I'm cleaning shoes. And I was only cleaning them, that was it, just using this stuff. And this stuff's not even that strong compared to some of the things we have to put up with. So still I recommend highly ventilated area, garage, backyard, shed, outdoors. Right now here in Colorado, it's fairly nice and sunny, so enjoy the weather outside if you're here in Colorado. But let's go ahead and do the other one. I'll do it off camera real quick. I'm gonna set this one aside to dry. By the time I'm done with the mate, this one's ready for the next step. So I'll see you back here in just a few minutes. All right, so I let this one sit for a little while. I realized, wait a minute, I'm supposed to leave one of these behind as a side-by-side, right? So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. So at this point, now that this is dry, again, just a few minutes, about, let's say like 3 to 5 minutes, plenty good. I'm gonna move on to my conditioners. You can use, obviously, the Saphir Renovator from the Medal Duo line. You could use the one from the Beauty Cure line. You could use the Cadillac Boot and Shoe Cream. It's all right stuff, but I'd rather even actually use Big 4 at that point, personally. But again, use Big 4 as well. I don't mean to dog Cadillac Boot and Shoe Cream. It's awesome stuff. It's just that it's an all-around purpose cream with just a little bit too much of certain ingredients, like waxes, that I'm not too happy with. Personally, I'm more of a person that likes products that are used, for the particular task that they're supposed to and meant for. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and just grab a little bit on a cloth. If you have a shoe that has broguing on it, and broguing is usually those holes, I got a pair of my old floor shimes in here, but those holes right there, you can use an applicator brush, like a small horsehair dauber or something. I like using it in that case just because it helps apply the cream inside those holes. And again, don't put too much on that brush and just kind of brush it out. In other words, I don't even have one around me somewhere here, but it's just a small applicator horsehair brush works out fine. And just get it in there and kind of work it, basically. Fly here, it's been bugging me all day. But anyways, just apply this stuff all over the place. And again, I'll always go over the toe afterwards, even if you did the toe filler like we did. But make sure you apply it where the toe is, that even if you did the steps of filling it in like we did before, there's still some areas that may need a little extra conditioning, so never hurts. Again, like I think I mentioned in the previous video about doing the toe scuff repair, I don't like doing the conditioning beforehand. Some like to do it. I don't, just because all the conditioning agents like the lanolin and the mink oil in this product here, it kind of counters the binding ability of the renovating repair cream, and we want it to bind to it nicely and kind of stick, and so that really takes away a lot from that. So anyways, we got these ones kind of conditioned over all around. Let those sit for, again, about another couple of minutes. Usually by the time you're done with the other shoe, this one will be done and ready to go. So give me just a second, I'll be right back. All right, so we gave it just a few minutes. We'll go ahead and buff it over real quick. At this point, if you are wanting kind of a duller finish, not too shiny or anything, just buff it over. That friction will help melt those waxes and bring out a little bit of a shine, but not too much. Just a hair, in other words. So you're basically done at this point. Now, if you're needing to take it to the next step up and you're wanting more of a shine, or you need to restore color, obviously you need to introduce colored cream. We just did our video on Monday talking about the difference between these two, between this one and this one right here. So we're going to be using the Medal Duo in particular. You could use whatever other brand too. Kelly's makes a great one, Tarago makes a great one, but you can't beat the Saphir Medal Duo Pomadier cream. Definitely my top pick. And I just put away my rag again. So, same application. If you got broguing, you can use a dauber brush, or you can use a cloth. Just be a little bit gentler around broguing, in other words, just because you're going to really get a lot of this in there, and this has a lot more wax than the Renovator cream. And this has a higher concentration of pigment, so we're going to go ahead and just apply it all over. Make sure you go through the toes. If you did the filler there, remember, don't scrub too hard. You are applying this. You are strictly just applying this over top. You are not trying to rub it in there. This does have turpentine in it to soften up the waxes that are in here. And so again, your goal is to just basically apply it and massage it into the leather. So vigorously, quickly go through, and don't apply too much pressure, in other words, because you could end up removing a lot of that filler, and that can happen. So just as a heads up, if you did the steps we already did on this one here. Okay. Now this one, definitely I will highly recommend that you let this dry for at least 5 minutes. Personally, I like to go through multiple shoes at a time. This might be easier when you have like anywhere between 3 to 5 pairs lined up, so that way you can really let them all just dry, and you just keep going back and forth in kind of a loop of the shoes that you're working on. So this one, I'm going to let it sit and dry for about 5 minutes to allow the turpentines to evaporate out of here and let those waxes kind of harden and dry, so that when we come back to buff it, the waxes actually have the opportunity to melt from the friction, where right now they're too soft to melt in any form in any way, just because the turpentine is in here. So give it a good couple of minutes, well, 5 minutes. 10 minutes is fine too, 15 is fine too. A number of people seem to go, I go 10 minutes, I go 15 minutes. 15 minutes is plenty. Anything more than that is, you may have just forgotten it. So anyways, we're just gonna leave it here for about 5 minutes, and I'll be back in just a few. All right, so we've given these just a little over 5 minutes to really dry and let that turpentine evaporate and the waxes to kind of harden and dry. So now you grab your horsehair brush. Very important that you have horsehair brushes for this, any kind of maintenance of footwear. One thing I did forget to mention, and I skipped over kind of before using the Reno mat, use your horsehair brush and buff them over, get off any of that dust or debris on there. I always forget to show this in videos. I have no idea why. A lot of times, mainly because most of the shoes that we're working on, we have compressed air back there, so we blow them off and stuff, and we have other machines that have buffing wheels on there, so we kind of brush them off real quickly. But heads up, do that beforehand. Definitely, if you're watching this and you didn't skip over this part, use your horsehair brush. Very important to have. As you can tell, I am using a light-haired brush here. This one's actually going to be converted into my black brush anyways, or darker color. You want to have a brush for each shade. Well, not each shade per se, but at least for your dark colored shoes and for your light colored shoes. I just had this one closer, and it's going to be my black one anyways, so just grab it and go ahead and brush. That friction will bring out that shine more. Side there just a little bit, as much as you can. I know it's kind of hard to get in there. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, it's very good to have the shoe trees in here, because it's going to help kind of stretch everything out and get everything aligned. So especially if you're using conditioners, it'll soften up that leather and get it to mold and shape back into where it needs to go. So shoe trees, didn't mention that one as well. I keep forgetting to mention certain things, I don't know why, but that's how I am, I guess you can say. Anyways, moving on to the next one. At this point, typically most people would be done and happy at this point, but there are little key features that you may end up forgetting. The next one is that you definitely want to take care of your edge dressing. Now for edge dressing, there are a few options. One that I really like to use is the Saphir Renovating Repair Cream. This has a lot of pigment to it, and it works nice to fill it in a little bit better. But there's also this one, the one that's a little bit more traditional, in other words, the Phoebing's Edge Dressing. This one only comes in black and brown. Apparently they have a neutral as well, but I'm not too sure about that one. This, as you can tell, is kind of a smaller sized one at 0.6 ounces. So, and I haven't tried these out actually, the little ones. Surprisingly, I've always used the bigger ones. We have large gallons that we use, that we put into containers and stuff and so on. So we're gonna crack open a new one. So I really want to test this out with you guys. So it's the first time for me. Again, this one you can use as well if you'd like to, by all means. I'll probably talk more about this product a little bit later. Obviously, I still also have to talk about this product, but if you trust what I'm saying, if you trust what I recommend, these are the two that I would go for. If you want an option for a lighter color, sorry about the noise, neighbors are remodeling, but if you want a lighter color option or something, this one does come in other options if you want something more solid, in other words. But if you're just restoring, this one works phenomenally, at least from the other ones. So this one you just crack open, and it's got a little applicator on the small bottles. There are 4-ounce bottles that have an applicator attached to the lid, so you take it out, there's an applicator on there. This one is built in. So, and don't do what I just did. Great. Anyways, it's a mess, you can see. You can go ahead and clean that up. Ruining my shine bar. Don't dab it like that, but just lightly, I guess. Just apply it on there. Around the edges, all around here. Some people do this at the very end. I prefer to do this before any kind of waxing. Now, obviously, if you're just doing the Pomadier cream, you're perfectly fine doing it this way. Just like that. Voila. Now we're just gonna let that sit and dry for a minute. What I actually like to do with the containers we have in the back, I actually grab my rag, one that I just used to clean up the big mess I just made, and wipe it off, because our goal is to really get that pigment into the edge of the sole. And what happens is this stuff actually leaves little bubbles, little streaks and stuff, and when it dries and hardens, it kind of looks shabby. For years my father did it that way, where we'd apply the edging, we'd let it sit there and dry. I did that for years too. That was a long time ago, and then we realized this stuff doesn't very well after it gets wiped off, and it looks even better actually once we do that. So you just wipe it off. Don't need much time for it to dry because of that, and you're ready to go. You know, actually it's fairly dry now. Yeah, got nothing coming off, so great. Even the bottom, thankfully is fixed. Some people actually use this on the bottom of their soles, so go ahead and do that if you want to. I kind of screwed up there with first time use of this particular one here, so don't make the mistake I did just now. But now at this point, we're going to go ahead and grab our waxes. So there are two ways of applying it. Most of you have seen me applying with just my bare fingers. I'm going to grab a cleaner rag than the one I just used to wipe everything up with. And I'm going to use a rag actually to apply it. And with the waxes, you're applying it, okay? So we're going to use a rag to apply it. Typically, again, I use my fingers, but the rag seems to pick up a little bit extra and lets you apply just that bit more, especially since we were repairing the toe on there. And for those of you who are wondering, like, oh, why do I need the wax if I've got waxes in the cream and stuff? The waxes in particular, they've got the harder ones. It's got more carnauba wax and a number of other waxes in there that are a little bit on the harder side. So it's going to bring out more of a shine, and it's going to give a better layer of protection when it comes to waterproofing. Again, smooth leathers, you don't usually use spray on them. I mean, you can, but you know, we're not going to do that, not on this. If you want to use a waterproofer on your shoes that are smooth leather like this, keep in mind that if you have a nice beautiful shine on it, that waterproofer actually ruins it. It makes it look really funny, like blotchy funny. So just use some wax, that little extra bit on there, and this wax can last you for quite some time, even if it's dried out. You know, just basically press harder, and I just pressed too hard on this one. Still has some turpentine in there, so. And I like to start in the toe area because by the time I'm almost done, I can apply a second coat on the toe. Brings out a little extra shine. Everyone's after the mirror shine these days, so this is not a mirror shine video, by the way, if you're wondering. We're not gonna do the mirror shine because it's a lot more of a process, and that's a whole video all in itself. And we'll do the mirror shine on these, don't worry. I think I'm gonna actually stop touching this right shoe here and just kind of use that as a before image. So, okay, so you've got everything on there. Now before you finish out, then you're gonna go ahead and grab your wax and start applying it on the edging here. And it gives it that final touch. When you give a little bit of wax on these edges here, it gives it that nice little bit of final touch. I'm dropping wax all over on my table here. Seals it up beautifully and gets it all taken care of. Plus on top of that, it'll help kind of smooth things out. If you didn't wipe off the edge dressing and it took a little too long on there and it dried kind of streaky, again, you're gonna help kind of even out all those coats and stuff. So grab it, add one more quick coat on the toe, and it's up to you how many coats you want. It's one of those things you just kind of figure out what your sweet spot is. If you don't want too shiny of a toe, if you want just a little bit, you know, maybe you just need one coat on the toe, or maybe you want it mirror shined, you could apply multiple coats. So that's completely up to you. If you want to find out more about mirror shining, there are a lot of great videos out there, but we're still going to be making another one as well on our end and show you what steps we like to take usually. So I'm going to let this sit and dry for a couple of minutes. This turpentine in the waxes will evaporate very quickly. Again, I haven't done a video too much on the waxes. I'm going to, I believe next week, I believe it's next week, yes. We'll be talking more about the waxes and why they're great. But for now, this is the steps that we're going to be taking for the full kind of presidential, once a year, once every 6 months type of treatment. In other words, we're going to let it sit here and dry for just a minute and we'll be right back. All right, so we'll let these dry for a little bit. Now at this point, we're going to grab our horsehair brush again and just start brushing it over. That friction's definitely going to bring out more of a shine. You can see that toe right there, and looks a little shabby. Looks better, but it still looks a little streaky. If you're wondering why that may ever be the case if you're using horsehair brushes, well, I mean, it'll look nice and everything. If you're happy at this point, by all means, you're done, in other words, but you can always take it a step up. There are a few methods. You can either use a nylon stocking like this. Jason Dornstar, Marcus Fisher in here, they love using these things all the time. I like using these chamois right here. We sell them, I think they're like $3 or $4 a piece. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're nice. There's a few methods of being able to do this. If you're sitting down at a chair, you can wedge the back of the heel here of the shoe. I'll actually start out like this to buff up the back of the heel nicely, and just grab both ends like this and just back and forth really fast. Then you flip around because the toe is more important, and do the same thing over the toe area. Those are the areas that you really want to bring out most of the shine. You can grab it afterwards and just kind of touch it up everywhere. Same thing with the little nylon stocking like this. You can also do that right there and just kind of buff it over. But I have yet to test something out that we have here at the shop, which is one of these Shine Butler things. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Yeah, sorry if I'm teasing you, but I want to try it out. So let me readjust the camera angle real quick. It's really hard for me to get the camera in closer because we've got the table here, but hopefully you can see this back here. So again, you can wedge this in between your knees. If you have a Shine Butler, you could obviously use it as well. Shine Butlers are very cool, but they are extremely hard to find and pretty pricey too, a little bit overpriced from what they used to be. Anyways, you're going to grab both ends nice and tight and just buff it over. If you're using a shine rag, as you can tell, this one has been used for some time. I prefer the slightly used ones over the brand new ones because they kind of build up a smoothness to them, in other words. So you're able to really get everything going. Beautiful. Whoops. All right. So unscrew that. if I stop knocking this thing over, brings out a lot more of a shine there. Obviously, again, not a mirror shine, but really restores it. So let me readjust back to where we were at real quick. All right, now again, if you have no shine butler and you're doing this by yourself, you're gonna have to kind of wedge it in between your knees when you're sitting down and really be able to get some of that friction going, in other words. But if you have one of those old shoe shine boxes, like I have one, let me grab it. Like this one right here, you can put your foot up like that and have somebody buff it up for you. Once it's up on here and your foot is inside the shoe, then you can grab both ends, or the other person will buff it up, or you can do it yourself as well. So that's an option as well for you to do. And that's if you have one of these old traditional ones here. This is kind of a cruddy box here. I thought I'd be able to find some cheaper alternatives because there's a lot of nice boxes out there, but there weren't too much out there for cheap ones, and now I can see why these were so cheap. Those are basically, I'm not even gonna bother talking about those in particular. If you are wanting to take a little bit extra step up, if you need to do a little bit of touch up, again, nylon stocking, not brush, just kind of, and the heat and moisture kind of helps. And voila. So that gives you kind of a comparison between the two. Now obviously, again, like I said, there is mirror shine options. You can take it up a little bit more, and we'll be getting into that here in a little while. One last step also I want to mention, if you're wanting to take care of your leather soles, if you have a pair of shoes with a leather sole bottom like this, I highly recommend using this, the Saphir Medal Duo, the Sole Guard in particular. This is highly refined vegetable oil that obviously everyone thinks that vegetable oil, why can't I just go to the grocery store and pay less for it? Well, you got to remember that this is highly refined, one, and two, it's particular vegetables that are blended just right quantities and everything to be able to treat and maintain the bottom. It restores the nutrients back into the leather, so it kind of brings back the suppleness, and it also helps protect it. Our very first video, well, my very first video I've ever done on YouTube is actually talking about this and comparing it side by side to regular vegetable oil using a number of other products. I think it was the Pomadier cream and the Seraphim cream, and just compare them side by side. This definitely, it won. You can't beat it. This was a very, controversial product. Everyone was saying, oh, just go pick up some vegetable oil at the grocery store. It's not the same. I've tested it. If you want to check out that video, again, don't judge me. It was my very first video ever, but I'll talk in greater detail more about this product and comparing it side by side. But I highly recommend it if you have leather-soled shoes to put this on and help restore that leather on there. Whether you have a high-quality leather like the JR leather, like on these guys that are all beaten up and everything from display purposes, that'll help restore some of that nutrients as well. Obviously, the JR leather is going to hold up for a long period of time, but it doesn't hurt to give it just a little bit of love and attention. Everyone always treats the edges. Well, not everyone, but most people treat the edges, but everyone always forgets about the bottoms. Take care of the bottoms as well. You're going to be a lot happier. If you have rubber soles on there, spritz a little bit of water on it and just kind of clean it up. You don't need to be using this, just a little water on a cloth and just kind of clean it off some. It's gonna make you a lot happier afterwards. That extra bit of 5 minutes of putting into it, it just feels nice. So highly recommend that, and it'll last you for quite some time. Actually, you probably need anywhere between 1 to 2 applications. The second application, I've noticed, does help a little bit with water resistance. Obviously, it's not 100% waterproof, but it's going to help better with water resistance. You cannot say that it's going to be 100% waterproof, because even applying a waterproofer on the bottom, it'll help, but it's not going to be 100% waterproof for a long period of time because it gets scratched up and worn a lot, and this just penetrates much deeper into the leather structure and into the pores and helps at least prevent it from getting destroyed, in other words. This I highly recommend using at least once every 6 months. This full treatment here, like we just did, I recommend doing maybe once every 6 to 12 months, depending how often you wear them. If you're not wearing your shoes often, maybe like once or twice a year, I still recommend doing it at least once a year, this full treatment on your leather shoes, just because even if they're sitting there on the shelf and you only take them out once or twice a year for events, or even once every 2 years, especially once every 2 years, you're going to come across that issue where that leather just starts kind of drying out and cracking. And just applying conditioner over top of that, if you have waxes over top, if you took them to a shoe shiner, a cobbler, if you did it yourself, you've got waxes that are clogging up those pores. So you definitely have to remove those waxes beforehand. And a Saphir Reno mat is going to be the way to go to help remove that. So it's going to be a must. Now, obviously, you don't want to be using this stuff too frequently, because it's going to dry out the leather a little too much. In other words, after a period of time, especially with corrected grain leather, you're not going to be able to really restore too much of that original finish. So just kind of be, a little gentler, in other words. This small bottle here will probably last you for quite some while, even if you have multiple pairs of smooth leather shoes. You're going to go ahead and use that up, and again, once every 6 to 12 months. It's a well-worthy investment if you're already using things like saddle soap, or you're just going straight for the renovator and everything. If you've got waxes on there, at least once every 6 to 12 months, remove it, because you're going to have buildup. If you're restoring a shine, like we did our maintaining a shine video, basically you're just trying to upkeep it, in other words, you're going to have layers of wax build up over a period of time, and those have to be removed to allow the leather to really breathe and 100% soak in what it needs to. So that's that, basically. Now, I know I mentioned we're going to be talking about doing the mirror shine on the toe, but I think I may hold off on it for next week. Next week episode of How To, we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and it's one of those that everyone's always asking about. If you're really interested, I don't know if I should say it, but I'll tell you what it's about. Taking care of the insides. Yes, we're going to finally talk about that. So stay tuned for that. We're going to talk more about it next week on Wednesday. I'm trying to remember what day it is and everything. But on Wednesday next week, we'll be talking about how to maintain and treat the insides of these, whether they're your own shoes or they're a pair that you thrifted or bought used anywhere. It's going to help significantly. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to be able to see that, and hit that notification bell icon to be notified as soon as that video is out. If you enjoyed this video, obviously there are tons of videos out like this. I just wanted to get one out of the way on our end to show you what steps we take, how we like to do it, that kind of presidential, annual treatment, whatever you want to call it, your semi-annual. This is the steps that we take. This is why I recommend it. Hopefully this was very enjoyable for you. Hopefully it helps educate a number of you and helped understand why this is needed to be done, why this needs to be used. Again, check out that video about Saphir Soul Guard versus vegetable oil versus other things too. I already forgot. I know it was Palmadier and Seraphim Cream. I think I used a few other things just to test out comparison-wise, but definitely check out that video. Just don't judge me too harshly. It was my very first video ever, so check it out. If you have any more questions about that, if you have any questions about any of this other stuff, comment down below. Go to our website, CobblersPlus.com. Send us a message, pictures. Stop by if you're local here in the Denver area. And again, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.